Hello guys, my name is Lars Stender. I'm a writer from Denmark who specializes in fantasy and science fiction. I'm here today to read from my fantasy novel Madigo and the Hounds. And if you want to know more about me, please follow me on Facebook, Lars A.R. Stender. Madigo and the Hounds, Chapter 45. Thomas Marius, or Mortartom, led Madigo along the curtain wall towards the Initiate's tower. It was a strange tower with a fairly narrow cylindrical body and three-story head that was twice as wide as its body. The roof was octagonal and consisted of crystal plates, just like the roof on the women's tower. The masonry on the roof was also strange. It was covered by a thick black crust, like bread that's been toasted for too long. The tower was closely guarded by a whole platoon of dragoids, and Madigo knew that wizards' apprentices were forbidden to approach the tower at night without Matero's permission. "The guards!" Madigo whispered out of the corner of his mouth to the little castle gnome, who was jumping from one merlin to the next. "Don't worry," Mortartom said, and didn't disappear over the edge of the curtain wall. It happened so fast and unexpectedly that Madigo actually didn't realize what had happened until a few seconds afterwards. Confused, he stopped walking and was just about to stick his head between the merlins to look for his new friend, when suddenly he noticed that something had caught the attention of the guards of Initiate's tower. There were 3 guards on the curtain wall on Madigo's side of the tower. They had been warming themselves by a brazier when something or other drew their attention, and they walked over to the wall to look over its edge, just as Madigo had. When all 3 guards had their backs to Madigo, he took the opportunity to sneak up closer. He could hear the 3 guards talking agitatedly to one another, and the next moment he also heard Mortartom's voice say, "Boo-hoo! You 3 ugly faces, you can't see me! Boo-hoo!" The 3 dragoids cursed and growled and debated among themselves. They could clearly hear the castle gnome, but they couldn't see him. His voice came from a place on the outer wall just below their embrasure. They couldn't grasp what was going on. Suddenly, one of them grabbed his nose and shouted a curse. Mortartom had kicked his nose tip. The 2 others grabbed their swords and began fencing with the empty air before them in an attempt to avoid getting attacked themselves. But it never happened. Mortartom had long since hopped onto the passage behind them and rushed over to Madigo, who, in the meantime, had managed to slip behind the guards unnoticed and proceed to the door that led from the curtain wall to the Initiate's tower. Madigo was on a landing where a single oil lantern was hanging from the wall. The lantern could easily light up the landing because the walls, in stark contrast to the towers outside, were chalk white and almost completely smooth. Across from Madigo, another door led to the next section of the curtain wall, and to the left of him there was a spiral staircase that went both up and down. At first, Madigo thought that they might be going up, but Mortartom had other plans. He first made sure that the door he and Madigo had entered was properly closed. Then he rushed over to the wall below the lantern and pressed on a strange-looking elongated stone, and a small part of the wall slid to the side, revealing a secret passage. With a broad smile on his little face, the gnome hopped in through the opening and motioned for Madigo to follow him. The opening was so narrow that Madigo had to scrunch completely up to make himself as small as possible and get through. But he was finally able to make it, and when he did, the door shut immediately behind him. He discovered that he and the gnome were in the passage that ran into a hollow space in the big curtain wall. He could stand up straight, but it was so narrow that he had to walk sideways. It was completely dark, but Madigo found that if he focused with his left eye, his demon vision, then he was still able to see Mortartom. The gnome could apparently find his way, because he grabbed hold of Madigo's sleeve and led the way. "This way," he whispered. There was actually no other way to go, Madigo thought, and followed him. Mortartom jumped and danced agilely along, but it wasn't that easy for Madigo. Sometimes Mortartom ran ahead, but he always returned to make sure that Madigo was with him. Presently, they stopped, and Madigo, who had been counting his steps, had calculated that he must have reached the area between the keep and the curtain wall. Mortartom became completely quiet now and moved with the utmost caution, as though he were afraid they would get caught. At some point, a bit of dust blew up in Madigo's nose, and he was just about to sneeze. Mortar Tom froze in panic, but Madigo buried his face in the sleeve of his frock in order to choke the sound of the sneeze. Mortar Tom let out a sigh of relief and waited for Madigo to continue walking with him. They came to a narrow stone staircase leading down to where there were some torches on the wall. Mortar Tom explained. He was just about to show them to Madigo, but he had found them himself with the help of his demon vision. The torches' wood had a different glow to them against the dark grey and black background of the walls. Madigo grabbed one of the torches and focused his gift on the top of it. He envisioned that the torch was lit, and then released his gift like a wave of fire, and the torch was lit. I must say, I was under the impression that your magicians had to say magic spells and things in order to be able to do that, Mortar Tom whispered, duly impressed. Not necessarily, Madigo said, and felt somewhat proud. With every minute that passed, he felt more and more at one with his gift. He no longer felt that he was dumber or weaker than any of the other wizard apprentices at Bloodstone. The real question was whether he was strong enough to confront Mortero. The more he learned about his uncle's plans, the more convinced he became that they would at some point meet in battle, using their magic against one another. The thought put a damper on his newfound pride. But he would no longer allow himself to be bullied. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. He followed Mortar Tom down the stone staircase that was so narrow that only one ordinary-sized person could walk on it at a time. It was steep. Going down at each 40th step, there was a small ledge or landing, followed by more steps. Downwards and downwards they went, and Madigo's legs began to get sore. He couldn't grasp how Mortar Tom could manage it. Each step was nearly half as big as he was, but the gnome just jumped down in calm, steady rhythm that gave Madigo the impression that he had used this way many times before. How long do we have left? Madigo asked at one point, breathless. Oh, not long, my friend. Not that long, just that long. Just 8 or 9 ledges more. Oh no, Madigo groaned as he continued to trot downwards. In his mind, the thought of having to climb all those stairs back up again was turning into a waking nightmare. And they continued to go down. But just as Madigo thought that it could go no longer, that if you did go longer, they go through the center of the earth and come out on the other side. His torch blazed up because of a strong draft. Shortly afterward, he and Mortar Tom reached the last landing and a big grey metal door. Outside the door, there was a faded yellow sign with some letters that Madigo couldn't decipher. There were also some numbers that, even though he knew the digits, the numbers themselves made little sense to him. Open the door, but be as quiet as a mouse, Mortar Tom said. Madigo reached out and took hold of the doorknob on the grey metal door. And put out the torch, Mortar Tom warned. Madigo frowned, but decided to follow the castle gnome's advice anyway. Let go of the doorknob and made a sweeping motion across the flame of the torch with his hand as he lifted his gift followed like a close wave. The torch was put out and darkness surrounded him and Mortar Tom. He placed the torch carefully on the landing and slowly opened the metal door ajar. A clear, undulating, bluish light seeped through the slits and fell on his face. He blinked and thought he saw something move. He hesitated, but pushed the door open a little more. The bluish, flickering light illuminated his whole body, yet still he couldn't really see what brought about the light. Just go inside, Mortar Tom urged him. But be careful. It's around this time that your uncle comes down to talk with the Sky Angel. Madigo felt his mouth go dry. But then he took a deep breath and stepped through the door into the blue light. However, he hadn't taken more than a few steps before he stopped, as he had walked right into a wall. But what he saw before him left him completely flabbergasted. End of chapter.
Dum dum dum. So the gnome is helping.
Yeah.
The gnome is his friend.
Yes.
So he's really like older friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much to say though.
No.
It's kind of straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going down.
Going down. Going down. Need to go back up.
Yeah.
Back up.
Oh,
Back
yeah.
up. Why is it always more fun to go down?
It's like the old tribute in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when he goes south, it's more fun than going west, east, and north because we go south. It's like going down.
On her.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You didn't see that coming.
No, I didn't. Oh, killing everything. Yeah.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But maybe we should play